I got an interesting question while I was at the Punch Card Investing meetup, the very first one we've ever done. It was a really successful meeting. We had plenty of people show up and had a lot of great discussions that came from it. And one of the points I wanted to kind of go over was from a question that I got from a man, Nanad. He was asking about how to switch between sort of a corporate mode and a business mode if you're holding down a job and you kind of have to show face over there and put on maybe a sort of persona to do that job in a particular way. But then in the meantime, you have a business that you're trying to run. How do you kind of switch between those sort of modes, or really just when it comes to running a business in general? If you're wearing a lot of hats, you're probably going to have to switch the way you're looking at things or the way that you're talking to certain people, just because you're dealing with all sorts of different types of people in different roles. And it was an interesting question, and we had a nice discussion about it, but kind of wanted to talk more about it here. And I've had a little bit more time to think about it, but it's one of those, it's a bit of a challenge, I suppose. But I guess what it really comes down to in any case, the way to be a successful communicator at any level in anything, whether it be as an employee for someone else, as an employer with employees, I think it really comes down to just being concise and direct with what you're trying to do, or with what you're trying to communicate, that is. And if you can't do that, things are going to get lost in translation, no matter who you're talking to. And kind of an extra layer on top of that is you want to know what your audience wants. And that could be on the customer side of things, could be on the employee side of things, like whoever you're talking to, you want to know what they want. And then you can tailor your speech in that way to address whatever it is they want. And that's easier said than done because, frankly, you have to know what that other side wants. And then you can actually tailor your speech to that. So that's kind of the overarching sort of approach that I take, is just you have to know your audience. But even so, there is a bit of a mental shift, I suppose, when you're going between a corporate job, like I was for quite some time, and then going to the business side of things. One thing that I find myself doing when I'm talking to really anyone in the business, I kind of have to slow myself down from maybe getting lost in overarching visions and plans that aren't really relevant to whatever I'm trying to communicate or whatever we're talking about. That's what I have a lot of trouble with. So say, for example, I'm talking with a technician or maybe someone who's going to be leading a few technicians, and I start talking about some sort of system that a technician's not really going to use, and I'm thinking long term we'll be here, and then we'll try to get to this point, and maybe at this point we'll have some more people. It just starts to get overwhelming, and even though it might work well in my own head and I see some sort of vision there, it doesn't make a lot of sense in a lot of conversations to start talking about that. It's not to say that I wouldn't want to be transparent and try to get people to buy into a longer term vision, but it is something I try to keep in mind, that I want to just try and be direct, get to the point, and don't get lost in things, and don't say more than you really need to say unless it's productive in some way. So I find that it's probably not that productive to go into things that people don't necessarily care about or need to care about, or it wouldn't be helpful for them to care about, really, given their own role. So I just try to be kind of careful with that and be mindful of that, because that's one of my weaknesses. And I guess as a broader lesson there, probably makes sense to try and identify whatever your weaknesses are in communicating things. And if you find that people are getting confused about something, maybe it's because you're being unclear about what it is you're trying to say, or maybe you don't understand what you're trying to say, or whatever's going on. But trying to identify that weakness, I think, is important. But when it comes to kind of the flip side, not so much talking to employees, if you run your own business and have a team under you, or I should say alongside, under, above you, whoever it is in the business, depending on how you delegate roles. But on the corporate side of things, if you're holding down a job, I think that's a bit of an easier sort of task, because you've probably, as long as your employer has done kind of what I was saying, in that they've told you clearly what is expected of you and what you're trying to get out of something, then all you really have to do is follow those directions. No need to say more than you have to say, and just try to keep it direct. Don't want to confuse anyone. So if you're responding to someone else on a team, then you don't want to confuse them either, or give them needless information that won't help them in some way, because now they're having to filter through whatever you're saying, and then you're wasting their time at that point. They're not going to be happy about that. So again, coming back to that core lesson, trying to be concise, trying to be direct, I think, is the most important thing when it comes to this sort of swapping between corporate versus non-corporate entrepreneurial business roles. It applies very broadly to kind of everything. Trying to be direct, get to the point. It does make sense to kind of identify those communication weak points and challenges because the world runs on communication. So the better you can get at that, the better you will do in pretty much anything. And before I make this video too long and start rambling and giving you needless information, I think I've gotten to the point. So with that said, thank you very much for watching, and until next time.